try as we might, RetroBlasting has not yet been able to acquire the Ghost Command Playset, a holy grail of 1980s toys, and a massive centerpiece complete with every major feature seen on the show. But to give you a sense of scale, we were able to acquire the Ghost Buggy, and the Ghost Command Playset has a garage capable of housing it. This was the playset that convinced me I would never do a video again without having everything I wanted for the video I was working on. This was the reason the Robotech series took so long to get started at RetroBlasting, because I wouldn't do it without the SDF-1 playset. Because this was the playset that forced me to compromise on a video feature. The Ghostbusters Ghost Command Playset. Part dollhouse, part haunted mansion, and a toy history unicorn. Some sources claim there were only 250 of these playsets made. Other sources say all of them were sold through catalogs rather than in stores. Regardless of the final numbers, this playset does exist and was sold to kids in the 80s for a brief time. And like the rest of the Schaper Ghostbusters figure line, the playset is extremely accurate to the TV series. The example I found came from Holland. It still had its original box and instruction sheet. It wasn't in perfect condition, and the kid who owned it originally didn't put the stickers in any of the right places, but at least they're here for the record. The good news is, as I said, the playset is very accurate to the Filmation animated series. The bad news is that the playset is just as fragile as the Ghost Buggy. Let's start with the good news though. There is a lot to love here. Where do I begin? Everything is here. The Skelevision TV,
change your own chair, Bob.
the snarky Skelephone,
You're in the Ghostbusters telephone answering machine and you're in luck.
the Skelevator that takes them down into the Rob Zombie dimension to change into their outfits. There's a notch in the attic specially made for Belfry to hang from. You get a trap door in the upper floor like all great playsets of the 1980s had. There's a little handle for Tracy to hang from at his leisure. There's a creepy grandfather clock.
9 o'clock.
A big cushy chair, the office desk and filing cabinet, complete with spooks in the files. There's a simulated secret door to a hidden room in the house, although there's nothing in there. And if you need to fix the Ghost Buggy, you get a jack stand and 2 spanners. The front door has a swing open feature powered by a rubber band, but given the strain it likely puts on the hinges, I'm not about to restore that action gimmick with a new rubber band. I'm happy to have a front door with both hinges intact. Okay, so now that we've saluted the effort that Schaper packed into this playset, it's time to take a step back and get real. A lot of the features in this playset don't work very well. The trapdoor mechanism is controlled by a white plastic lever that barely holds the floor panel up. There is no way it would hold the weight of a figure. My example might be worn out, but it isn't a good design overall. The elevator has no doors to secure a figure inside, and the swinging arm loves to disconnect from the lower guide pin, making the entire assembly run wild. Sliding the elevator cab up and down the plastic rail is also a dicey prospect, given how fragile all of the parts seem to be. So it becomes an unwieldy and largely unusable mechanism that's constantly in the way of the rest of the playset. The grandfather clock loves to pitch forward, so you end up leaning it against an interior wall and forgetting about it. I will give the playset top marks for having a front door that's tall enough to allow most of the figures to walk through. Everyone, except Tracy the Gorilla, has no issues with entry into the Ghost Command playset. And that's great. The Skelevision accessory is poorly designed, so the antenna is often broken on used examples, because the antenna comes off the feet and is forced to go through the Skelevision skull at an angle, straining the antenna and usually breaking it. Speaking of antennas, the garage is only barely big enough for the Ghost Buggy if you remove the rear engine antennas, which on a toy this fragile isn't something I relish doing over and over. So for display purposes, it looks like the antenna on mine won't be attached to the buggy for a very long time. The playset is constructed in two halves, with the blue roof sections friction clipped onto the lower yellow sections. Because the carry handle is on the top section, but the heavier yellow section is pulling down on everything, it results in splitting of the plastic at the join. I recommend always picking the playset up from the lower yellow section to move it. You'll also want to be careful of the arrows and roof sign on the outside of the playset. These are held onto the roof with fragile plastic pins that break very easily. Don't bump them or put a lot of pressure on them. I know I've just listed a lot of drawbacks to this alleged holy grail of action figure collecting, but I know why this set is so highly sought after, and I agree with the collecting community on this. The Ghost Command playset is gorgeous, and so accurate to the animated series. The colors make it pop right off the shelf. It's a display case darling, and even if you don't have an interest in the Schaper figure line for Ghostbusters, this is the kind of haunted house your real Ghostbusters might race to and battle ghouls and goblins. Plus, it's a far more interesting playset than the real Ghostbusters firehouse, or as I like to call it, the Tower of Boredom. I'm really happy to own one, and not just for its rarity and its display value, but most importantly, because the Ghostbusters figures just don't feel complete without it.